Guys, welcome to today's video where we're rounding out the second to last video in the series, how to build the ultimate Lexus GX470 off-roading and overlanding rig for under 20 grand. In the final video, I'll do my best to tally the total cost of everything that has gone into my build in 2024 prices, since, as we know, a lot has changed over the past several years with much higher inflation. In today's video, we're covering the overlanding equipment that makes life much easier when doing long stints on the trail. Now, a lot of people are confused by what overlanding means, so I'll make it simple. You're car camping. The only difference is that you're far away from civilization and are traversing terrain that would be impossible in a normal car. So it tends to be associated with vehicles equipped with off-road performance modifications, but it doesn't have to be if the terrain allows. You can overland in a Prius if the road or trail allows for it. With definitions out of the way, let's get into what I consider overlanding equipment categories. First, I have storage. Next, auxiliary power. Then, camping gear, which includes food storage and preparation and cooking. After that, cold weather equipment. Finally, navigation and communication tools. As you can see, most of this does not have to do with the vehicle itself, including upgrades and recovery and repair equipment, and there's a good reason for that. I have already covered those topics in previous videos in the series, so please go ahead and check those out if you're interested on how to get started there. Also, please just take a moment to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and turn on notifications by hitting the bell icon. Since starting grad school, I've unfortunately had to cut way back on making videos, so they're fewer and further between. So to ensure you don't miss out on them, having the notifications on will ensure that when I am able to post a video, it'll appear on your YouTube timeline. Beyond the items mentioned in this video, which I mostly already have in my setup, I feel like I only need one more to feel like it's a complete build for overlanding: an awning. To find an awning, I'll be shopping on the reconrecovery.com site, which has awnings in addition to most of the overlanding equipment mentioned in this video. The site is run by a good friend and fellow GX470 enthusiast, so I know I can confidently point my audience to shop there and that you guys will get good service and a competitive price for the overlanding equipment you're looking for. I always love to support fellow GX470 enthusiast businesses. Okay guys, enough rambling, let's get right into it. Starting with storage. The core of your storage scheme for an overlanding SUV build is going to be your sleeping platform, which resides in the cargo area. You may have seen a lot of these pre-built things for sale for over $1,000, but I'm here to tell you, you can build one yourself in an afternoon for $100 or maybe a little bit more depending on lumber prices. I made a video a long time ago where my wife and I built one ourselves in a few hours. All these years later, I don't even wish a little bit that I spent 10 times the amount for a pre-built one. It's perfect. If you want to get out and camp right after getting your GX470 or similar rig, this should be the first modification you make to your vehicle. It is multifaceted, fun to build, cheap, and totally reversible. You can use this platform to create a flat surface to sleep inside the vehicle. For this video's purpose, you can use it to organize and store your equipment in a way that maintains a low center of gravity, which ensures optimal handling, and also secures heavy items like spare parts and tools under a floor, so when you're bounding down the trail, everything remains secure. Under the platform, to ensure that any spills don't seep into the carpet, and to ensure that you have access to everything underneath, I recommend getting just some plastic under bed storage bins. It doesn't scream high-end like the pre-built unit with the drawers, but it certainly does the job. Beyond that, for storage, I recommend having some interior wall storage to make the most out of the space surrounding the sides of the cargo area. There are several companies who make built-in MOLLE panels to fill the space inboard of the rear windows for storage. I installed the SMW off-road pieces. Some people suggest that this type of storage is not practical, but I use just about every square inch of the stuff, mostly for items that need to be accessible but generally stay permanently mounted, like my auxiliary power management system and rooftop tent ladder. I also pack stuff between the rungs of that ladder to maximize the space utilization. Next, for storage, I recommend getting a roof rack of some sort, or at least some reinforced crossbars. I think the company LFD makes those, if you don't want to go the whole way with a full-size rack. I'll talk more about why in a bit, but they're very versatile for overland equipment storage. After you upgrade to a larger diameter than stock tires, you may have discovered that the spare doesn't fit in the area underneath the cargo floor anymore. Many people opt to strap the spare down inside the vehicle off to one side, but when you have a sleeping platform, this doesn't work as well. This is also super super inefficient use of limited cargo space. Another option is that you can throw it on the roof, where you now hopefully have either reinforced crossbars or a full roof rack, but that is pretty poor for aero efficiency. It puts weight at the highest point of the vehicle, which negatively impacts handling and reduces the roof storage area needed for other critical items I'll talk about later. To solve this storage conundrum, I recommend some sort of rear-mounted tire solution. Since this video is about maximizing storage, I recommend a swing out as opposed to mounting straight to the tailgate. This is for a few reasons. One, a swing out mounts directly to the frame rather than the tailgate skin on the top end, so it's stronger for miles and miles of corrugated trails. Two, a swing out gives the opportunity for more storage of critical items like extra fuel, which is absolutely a requirement of overlanding, especially in a V8 powered rig like the Lexus GX470. The 2UZ is pretty thirsty, so I definitely recommend this if you're going to go on a long trip where fuel stops are unavailable along the way. For a long time, the only options to get a rear-mounted swing out was to go with a full rear bumper setup, which has the disadvantages of being extremely heavy and expensive, with the advantage of providing some rear armor and a bit more clearance than stock. Now, however, you have the Restless Off-Road tire swing out available to the GX and 4Runner communities, which provides a great balance between cost, weight, clearance, and of course, storage. Having the option to bring a 5-gallon jug of gas or potable water with me off-road without compromising my interior storage space or risking gas fumes inside the vehicle is very reassuring to me. So be sure to check out Restless Off-Road. I'll link them in the description. I think we can all feel good about supporting local shops who support and develop cool parts for our Toyota Lexus 4x4s. Now, let's move on to the next section, auxiliary solar power systems. I get that some people want to get away from anything having to do with electricity for the weekend, and totally respect that decision. Primitive camping is super cool in its own right, but depriving yourself of modern conveniences is not necessary for overlanding. But I'm also here to tell you that spending a ton of money on an auxiliary power system isn't necessary either. Before starting my channel, I was totally intimidated by anything having to do with wiring, electricity, or anything like that. Now, I've discovered that the best way to learn that type of stuff with low cost, low consequence equipment is to build your own auxiliary power setup. There are two main ways to go about creating a solar power system. One is more complex and will require some study and working with a lot of wiring. The other is very simple and will only require minimal wiring work. The more complex one is what I consider my permanently mounted onboard power system. It leads to the solar panel I pasted on my hood, and I use it to run my fridge and to charge whatever electronic equipment I have with me without using the vehicle's 12-volt system, such as drone batteries, phones, cameras, rechargeable LED lights, and more. This system has a solar panel with wiring running into a charge controller which distributes the power to a 12-volt lithium iron phosphate battery and out to a DC fuse block, a switch DC outlet with USB-A and USB-C outlets, as well as a cigarette lighter style outlet, which I use to power my fridge. And finally, an inverter, which enables me to plug household type items directly into the power system. Mine isn't the cleanest or best organized, but it was a lot of fun to make, and it was very cheap. I'll link the video where I started putting together that system here. Now, to cover the dead simple solution, the most complex part of this system is mounting the solar panel and routing the wiring inside the vehicle. I broke down every step of that process in the video linked here. I installed the solar panel for this simple system on the roof, ran wires down the windshield, into the engine compartment, and into the cabin from there, then back to the rear seat floor, where I put what makes this simple solution so brilliant, the Dr. Prepare PowerMax 100 amp hour portable power station. This thing looks just like a 100 amp hour battery, but with the max hub that goes in between the terminals, it turns into an all-in-one power station where you can get 1,280 watt-hour power station that you could charge with a solar panel and use it to power your electronics for the mid $300 range. It's insane value in my opinion. The max hub itself is an MPPT solar charger charge controller, which doubles as a USB-C outlet and also features other standard outlet types. If you also wanted to hook up an inverter so that you could power household type electronics, no problem. Just hook up the positive and negative wires that come with the inverter to the positive and negative terminals on the Power Max station. This really does make it super simple for someone who doesn't feel comfortable with wiring at all. Other than that, for auxiliary power, if you want to leave your Power Max station hard mounted to power your fridge or whatever, I recommend having a dedicated compact portable power station to bring inside of your camping setup so that you can have access to electronics while they charged without having to wake everybody at camp up by opening and closing doors, etc. I use the EcoFlow River 2 Max for that purpose. It has a totally adequate 500 watt hour capacity and can power household items that use 1000 watts, which is just insanely good performance for such a small power station. To test this, I used it to power an espresso machine, which in addition to making good coffee, can boil water super fast. If you like having instant noodles while out camping, but don't want to have a 10-minute wait to boil a pot of water if it's cold out with a stovetop setup, the River 2 Max also boggles the mind with how fast it charges. You can plug it into your wall at home and go from 0 to 100% in an hour, making it super convenient. Anyway, if you want to check out more specs, here's a video I made on that portable power station, which is, I think, among the best you can buy, albeit much more money per watt hour than the other options I talked about. Now, let's move on to camping gear. The central piece of equipment for camping is going to end up being where you spend the night sleeping. There are a couple solutions, as far as I can tell, ranging from inconvenient and uncomfortable but cheap to ultimate convenience and comfort but very expensive. To start, just bring a simple ground tent from any outdoor supply store. As many of you know, setting up a tent takes a while and isn't convenient and doesn't get you off the ground, but it is pretty simple and very cheap. The next level is using the sleeping platform I mentioned before, not just for storage, but to actually sleep on in the back of your vehicle. This eliminates extensive tent setup and pack up times, is also pretty cheap if you put it together yourself. The only downside of sleeping on the platform in the vehicle is the fact that you have to empty out all of your cargo out of the rig in order to sleep in it, which necessitates repacking the car before setting off, which is not really very much fun. Finally, you have the almighty rooftop tent. Ultimate convenience, comfort, simplicity, and speed of deployment, as well as repacking if you go with a hard shell type. With that in mind, I think these things cost about $1,000 more than makes sense for most people. I got a significant Black Friday discount on my Free Spirit Odyssey, and it was still over $2,700, which is kind of crazy. I made the purchase right before inflation got super crazy, so I'm not really complaining, but it is a lot for someone who doesn't spend every other weekend camping. If you do camp super often, then a hard shell rooftop tent is a no-brainer in my opinion, but I'm honestly not sure I made the right choice for my own situation. However, it's just part of my rig now. It stays mounted permanently because I park outside since my garage is way too small to fit my now 7-foot tall rig. And when I do actually get a chance to go camping, like I recently did for the first time with my 2-year-old, it makes things a lot easier and more comfortable, even in heavy rain and high winds. Beyond that, for camping gear, I'm gonna just recommend a few fold-out chairs and a table and some other basic equipment to make camping more convenient. Next, to a topic I'm candidly lacking in is food preparation and cooking. It's not that my setup doesn't allow for it, it's that it's super inconvenient to pack. I use a multi-fold out table from Cabela's, which, cargo space aside, would be amazing. Plenty of counter space and a bin for cleaning dishes, etc. But it's hard to pack up and it takes up a lot of space. I'll be looking for a fold down table to mount on my Restless off-road tire swing out as soon as possible. Otherwise, on this topic, I'm open to ideas and suggestions in the comments. What works best for table space? As for food storage and temperature control, nothing does it quite like a fridge/freezer inside your rig. If you have an auxiliary power system like I described earlier, it opens up the opportunity for this absolutely game-changing item. Having a fridge when off-grid means that you don't need to change what you eat when you go camping and only have, dried foods and jerky and other less healthy packaged snacks. You can even make an occasion out of cooking off-road. My wife and I actually made some stovetop bread on the trail one time, and it was the most delicious I think I've ever had, paired with some sausage gravy I made from scratch as well. That said, let's talk about options for cooking on the trail. You could use the backpacker style stoves if you really want to maximize space utilization, but most people will go with a single or dual burner propane stove, which is what I use. The only annoying thing about this is the frequency with which you have to swap out the 1-pound propane tanks, which will definitely make you want to bring a bigger propane tank. If you have all the items listed above, a 2.5 or 5-pound tank is pretty easy to mount outside your vehicle somewhere, but that has the inconvenience of needing to go and get it refilled periodically instead of just buying the 1-pound cans, so I'm not sure what I'll end up doing. Again, leave a suggestion in the comments. I am tempted to go with this third option, which is using an induction stove. If you add more auxiliary power to your rig, this option becomes more and more viable. Producing this much heat with electricity takes a lot of power, but the convenience, compactness, and low cost of modern 12-volt induction stoves makes it an interesting prospect. If any of you use an electric induction stove for cooking, let me know how you like it. I prefer using DC power since it's more efficient, but I could also upgrade my inverter from 700 to 2000 watts to run a household style cooktop. I think it could be worth it for the convenience and space saving. Having onboard power also means you can even run a pressure cooker to make stews and other hot meals that would take a long time on a regular stovetop. Now let's move on to the next section, cold weather gear. Getting the larger propane tank also has another benefit beyond cooking, running a portable fire pit. My buddy John over at Johnny Taco Outdoors on YouTube, which you should definitely subscribe to right now if you love pure overlanding content. He has a fire pit, and there's nothing quite like it on a cold night, short of a real campfire, which is mostly prohibited throughout my region due to the risk of wildfires. Regardless, be sure to bring clothes that are much warmer than you think you'll need if you go camping in the winter, of course, depending on where you live. But I live in Southern California, which is not especially known for its cold weather. But when you get out to the mountains where most people camp, I've definitely found myself wishing for a few more layers. If you skimp on the warm clothes and don't want to lug around a propane fire pit, I highly recommend you at least include this cheap and effective solution to staying warm while sleeping: a diesel heater. Do not use a propane heater inside your tent. It's tempting to just bring your buddy heater in the tent with you, but propane displaces oxygen, and since propane heaters use a flame, there's potential for fire hazard. But beyond that, it produces a humid environment inside your tent. If it's really freezing inside your tent, you may wake up with a layer of ice on the inside of your tent with a propane heater. Whereas if you use a diesel heater, which produces beautiful desert dry air, you wake up knowing you slept with minimal risk and don't have to spend a bunch of time drying out your tent to prevent mildew when you get home. I've done a couple diesel heater in a sealed box videos where I show you how I did my full custom and weatherproof build, but you don't have to do any of that. Just get the one that comes in the metal case and run it like that. The only reason I made the case is because I thought I might permanently mount it to my vehicle's exterior like Chase from 2-Track Nation did to his, but I haven't really gotten around to that and don't really think I need to until I'm winter camping a lot more than I currently am. Finally, as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I'll just add that an awning is a great addition to any overlanding setup. You don't want to spend the whole time camping inside of your tent if it starts raining or getting sunburnt if it's sweltering. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what the best awning options are, and I'll make a video about it when I make my choice. Now let's get to the final subject: communication and navigation tools. First of all, for comms and navigation tools, I recommend having a mounting system somewhere near the middle of the dashboard for you to keep all of your equipment organized. I use the Ohana Rig Supply mounting system, which enables so many options for mounting all sorts of equipment. As for the radio equipment, if you're like me and don't have a super keen interest on getting the perfect radio setup, but just want to be able to communicate within your convoy when you go overlanding, you're in good company. The problem with a super powerful radio is that you pick up traffic from all over the trail network, which can get a bit annoying, which is why I recommend just keeping it simple with a handheld radio. If you're already a radio comms enthusiast, then you already know what to do. But if you're like me, a nice walkie-talkie is perfect. You can keep it charged with your auxiliary power system and attach it to your Ohana Rig Supply mount when you're not using it. I found that clipping and unclipping a walkie-talkie to Ohana Rig Supply's holster mount is the best simple radio setup. A lot of people may say, well, in case of emergency, you need a powerful radio, but I'm not convinced. That may have been true 10 to 20 years ago, but nowadays we have better emergency communication technology available to us, which just so happens to double as navigation equipment. If I'm going on a long overlanding journey, I'm going to download the map onto my cheap old iPad, which mounts directly on the Ohana mount. The only problem is, when I'm off grid, the satellites don't know where I'm at. This is where the Garmin InReach Mini 2 or similar satellite communicator device, that's where that comes in for me. If you connect the tablet or phone to the satellite device via Bluetooth, which is connected to the Iridium network, you can see your location on the downloaded map. Not only that, if you purchase the subscription, which can be done month to month on the Garmin site, you have an SOS button available to you, which can give you access to emergency services in the worst case scenario. For me, this setup is sufficient and cost effective, especially if you get a used Garmin device and a refurbished previous generation iPad. If you couple this with a modern iPhone, which has SOS satellite communication available, emergency scenarios are covered far more reliably than a high-powered radio, in my opinion. Again, if you're a radio enthusiast and you're familiar with the radio network in your area, that's great, but for 99% of people who just want to overland and get off grid, the safest bet these days for emergencies is these satellite devices I just talked about. Okay guys, that's all I have for today's video. Next time, we'll tally up how much all this stuff costs and see if there's a path to do it all for under 20 grand. We'll see you in the next video.